All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Potential Project. I'm your host, Sean Calhoun, and today we have a very special guest. He's known as the Sugar Free Man. He's the founder and CEO of SugarAddiction.com, as well as the founder of QuitSugarSummit.com. Guys, so without further ado, Mike Collins. How we doing, Mike?
Sean, I'm doing good, man. It's an honor. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So, if people couldn't tell by the the intro and the names that I spat off at what you go by, today we're going to talk about sugar, guys. A lot of it, and not how to bake cookies and sweet treats. We're going to talk about the effects sugar has on our health and our overall body. Right. So Mike, I know these are interesting titles for your websites and for what you're doing, the foundations. Um, Tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into how you started all this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of got in my head years ago. I got sober years ago, and that's another podcast. I'm an open book, though. We can talk about it if you want. And I just wanted to get healthy, really. And so I did. It took me many years to actually quit sugar. Because no one was listening to me. They didn't kind of understand what the hell I was talking about. But I'd read a book Sugar Blues many, many years ago. And it was famous at the time. Actually, the guy ended up marrying Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star. And yeah, it was wild. And because she was really a health fanatic. And so anyway, they promoted that book pretty heavily in the 70s and 80s. And so it just got in my head. I don't know. So anyway, I raised a couple sugar-free kids. Um, One of the things really was that the sugar was acting a lot like the drugs and alcohol. I was just, attracted. I grew up with it. I can tell you that story, how I kind of got started with it all. But um, I raised a couple of sugar-free kids. I bought Sugar Addiction in 2009, and I put out really good information, but I was still working, and it wasn't really, you know, and people, they got good information from it, but um, I don't know. It just didn't work out. I was still working. It was just a part-time gig. But the kids always said I should write a book. And so in 2018, I actually did. I was getting near semi-retirement, and the book did well. Still does well on Amazon. Um, but then after that, I started coaching people, and I always tell people, Sean, that I built this company backwards because
Hmm.
I knew I needed support groups online, right? I knew people like this is a lonely addiction. Even though everybody appears to be using it, 20% of the people that call me are crying because they've never told another soul, right? They're
Hmm.
overweight. They never, they think I never heard the story of people throwing stuff in the garbage and then coming back an hour later and eating it out of the garbage. They think they're so horrified by their behavior. They just never think that anyone else could possibly be doing this when in reality, I've heard that story hundreds of times. And then the strange thing that happened was the pandemic. Okay, you remember the what do you call it, the news reports where completely pictures of completely empty shelves of sugar, flour, candy, ice cream, alcohol, soda. People were just like stocking up in comfort food and then right. But another part of it was that families, everyone was started using Zoom. Like no one used it. Well, almost no one used it before. Business did, but no, families didn't use it. And, even to talk with your sick people in the hospital or your relatives, you had to have Zoom. So it was this perfect storm, I guess, is that, and just the business just exploded. People, like I was kind of geared up. I had coaches, and today we have, 5 meetings a day, support meetings online. We've got coaches, certified coaches. We've got a certified coaching business that we certify coaches who just got approved by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. So it's been a little bit of a ride since the pandemic, and it really hasn't slowed down. Oh, and then you mentioned the summit in 2016. We did start interviewing. the world's leading experts on sugar addiction, researchers and professors and authors and stuff. And that really exploded too, um, mainly because people, again, had never heard of it, right? And so that's we're doing our 12th event in January, and we used to do them twice a year. And it's really, I've got a 30-day challenge on the site and both sites. And, people would like, um, it's been let's put it this way, it's been modified 4 or 5 times.
Hmm.
We keep learning both from the people and from the experts, right? And really at this juncture, Sean, it's just pattern recognition. I can pretty much tell on day 5 or day 7 or day 10 or whatever, wherever you're going to be in the detox, because detox is real. You're going to get headaches, you're going to have lethargy, you're going to be irritable, you're going to be starving all the time. So anyway, that's the short version of, and then in the middle of it all, somebody called me the sugar-free man. So that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the short version. That's the podcast introduction to how I got to be the
Yeah.
sugar-free.
Okay, amazing. Well, let's start to unpack some of this stuff. And you said a few key points
Yeah.
that I wanted to bring to light so that hopefully it ties the dots between the story, right? And you started off with saying that you are now sober. Now, how long have you been sober for?
I hate giving away my age, but I think I have kids younger than, or older than you. Um, it'll be 40 years on February the 15th. And yes, there was a
Congrats.
woman involved because it was the day after Valentine's Day, but whatever.
Well, that's incredible, man. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah.
Um, okay, and then how long after you became sober did you start to realize that you were having, I guess, negative downstream effects from sugar? Like, what brought this to your attention? I know you mentioned the book, but was there something in your life where you started to have symptoms and you were curious of, is it the things that I'm eating?
Yeah, no, that's a good question simply because like it was starting to act like the drugs and alcohol. Like I'm drinking at that time 16-ounce Mountain Dews, like at that time the highest caffeinated beverage and highest sugar beverage on the market before energy drinks and the explosion of the beverage industry. And they used to call me the Mountain Dew man at the store. And
Wow.
like cookies and candy and pasta and pizza. I didn't eat any real food, right? And at the time, I'm in my late 20s and I've got, you know, adult acne and rosacea. My face is all red. The only thing I really wanted to do was not have a big red nose like my grandfather. You know what I mean? And it was actually getting worse. It was like going in the wrong direction. And I was tired all the time, irritable and a lot of anxiety. I
Mm.
quit the caffeine first because of the anxiety, right? It was just bothering me. But I went to straight sugar. I went from, Pepsi or Mountain Dew to um, Sprite. So I'm drinking Sprite like half the day. Anyway, it was just, it was a physical thing and a get healthy thing. I was working out at the gym and, running with some pretty healthy dudes. And I just, I wanted to be healthy. And that book had kind of got me motivated, I guess the best way to put it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And now you're starting to get acclimated with exercise and being around other people.
Right.
So making the step to maybe drink less soda throughout the day and make some adjustments to real food. What
Right.
was what was the either the first thing that you started to do or what held you back from getting fully off of sugar? Because I mean, drinking that amount of soda is quite addictive. I've been there before when I was younger.
Yeah, look, it's the older guy, these back then they were kind of crusty old dudes, and they'd say, are you sober today, Mike? And I'm like, yeah. He says, don't worry about the damn sugar. And so I
Mm.
knew, and I audited. It was pretty in its infancy back then, but food groups. So I went to a couple of those, and they really understood the sugar part of it, but it didn't mature much, literally for 40 years, almost for
Mhm.
35. Anyway, what I'm getting at is that I didn't have any support. And if people don't understand this part of it, they're never going to get this whole time with us together is going to be a waste. But I didn't have any support. No one understood what I was talking about. No one knew that I felt better when I finally got off the caffeine, even though I was still using sugar. And I would go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It took years, literally years. I would wake up every morning, put two Tylenol in my pocket. I owned this little this drive-through convenience store. So I was wearing shorts. And I'd put the two Tylenol in my pocket because I knew I was going to have a headache that day at 4 o'clock because I was trying to quit. And by the end of it, I had two little like stains in my shorts from those tablets because I had them in my pocket for like 6 months, right? Different
Wow.
ones every morning, right? I would still just use the sugar. And it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? And so finally it just stuck, right? I just made it through. And I didn't realize the process that I was going through. And the process that I was going through, which is what we'll discuss today, was the emotional configure. Like I was using alcohol for a reason, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Drugs for a reason, caffeine for a reason. And that reason is very simple. And it's simple to understand, but not simple to do, not easy to do, right? And that most people, anybody that starts using sugar at a young age, like it's a very common construct in the world of alcohol and drugs, that if you started using alcohol and drugs at 14 or 15, you stopped growing emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Your life's upside down, your finances, your career, your relationships. You just never solved life's problems, okay? By 4 o'clock the next day, you numbed out with whatever your substance of choice was, and you never got through it. Someone dies or someone, breaks up with you, or, there's a tough situation financially or emotionally. It doesn't happen, it doesn't solve itself in a day. You
Mm-hmm.
got to work through it, okay? There are things you got to work through emotionally, right? Now, extrapolate that idea of 14 or 15 using drugs back to 4 or 5 or 6 years old, likely in the womb, but 4 or 5 or 6 years old. And you're setting up what we have today, which is a
Mm-hmm.
perfect storm of outsourcing our emotional life to a substance. This is where comfort food comes in. This is where the idea of comfort food, this is where this misnomer, and it is truly a misnomer, of emotional eating comes in. So, if you talk to someone who has lost 100, and it's not all about weight, you can be a very thin sugar addict, but let's just use this as an example. So, because pretty much most people that are obese, it's like 74% or some large amount are sugar addicts, right?
Mm.
Um, and so, and again, I'm not here to shame anybody. It's not about body size. It's just a good indicator, right? So anyway, you go back and you understand, if you talk to those folks, they will all tell you that it wasn't the thing that got them well or into a right-sized body was not what they ate or what they exercised. It was the emotional
Mm.
understanding that they needed self-soothing methods that were not substances, okay? Meaning they had to start exercising, walking, running, going to yoga, getting a hug, getting a manicure, getting a pedicure. It doesn't necessarily, you're not burning calories, okay? Let me make that clear. You're
Right.
not burning calories, okay? You are understanding that your dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors, every brain and body reward chemical, the science proves very clearly, as the experts on the summit will tell you, very clear that people they're affecting their brain reward chemicals with this drug. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
these legal drugs, these sugar flowers and caffeines, they're affecting they're honestly, Sean, they're and I've been getting hard on this, and I wasn't at the beginning, but like I'm really getting strong on this, that people that come to me, 85% of them come to me for weight loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are not mentally capable. And I mean that with all due respect. They are not mentally capable emotionally to make the decisions required to change their health and weight. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Literally not in a place because their brain, the word hijack comes in. Their nucleus accumbens, their control center, has been hijacked. Okay. And the reason I know this is because 5 months later, 6 months later, a year later, when they've lost their weight, they're getting healthy, their type 2 is in remission, whatever, they come to me and they say, Mike, I cannot believe that 5 or 6 months ago, a year ago, when we first met, that I was going out in the snowstorm and getting ice cream, that I was, um, you know, whatever eating out of the garbage, right? These are doctors, lawyers, multimillionaires, an Olympic athlete, that they're eating stuff out of the garbage, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you, this is just, I don't know where it came from, but 85% of my clients are women, 95 probably.
Okay.
I like because, and I think, first of all, I think women are smarter than men, but I also believe really that I think that they've been struggling with diet for many years and they finally narrowed it down to the Achilles heel being sugar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I get off on a little tangent, a little run.
Yeah.
Some, so I don't mean to hijack
No.
but it's just I want to get it right up front. I don't want to waste somebody's half hour of their time if they're not willing to let this information light on them and understand that it has absolutely. When people come to me, they want an eating plan and an exercise plan.
Yep.
They've been hijacked by the diet industry that has said eat less, exercise more.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing could be further from the truth. You don't need exercise at all to lose 100 pounds. I've had it happen several times.
Right.
The About the most exercise they got was walking to the car, right? That's it. Okay. Now, it helps, but we're not using it to quote unquote burn calories. That's been debunked. Okay. What we're using it for is very simply what we've been talking about to find new systems of self-soothing, which exercise is great for, probably the
Yep.
best,
Yep.
right? So anyway, again,
Yeah.
I apologize for like
So
getting, but
no, no.
it's easier to get it out and then we can unpack it more, you know?
That's what I love to do, right? I
Yeah,
didn't want to interrupt because you were saying a lot of good things, but I'm
yeah,
just drawing connections to number one, your story, and then how it relates to these people that you're talking about. One thing that you touched on was how early we really get addicted to sugar and caffeine and flour. And guys, I
right.
hope you guys are able to draw the correlation that these are literal substances. And Mike used the word user before because that's essentially what you're becoming. You are addicted to these substances, right? The problem that I have though is that if you look at someone who is 14 or 15 starting to drink or smoke weed or take drugs, that's looked at as, oh my gosh, that's not a good path. It's going to lead to X, Y, and Z. Whereas from the time someone is born, we are inundated with holidays that are surrounded by sugar, birthday parties, celebrations, right? All of these celebratory things in our life are revolving around some type of legal drug, we'll call it, right? Like sugar. And it's marketed directly to all ages. I mean, children to old people. There's candy commercials and chocolate commercials all over the place. So that's the biggest problem that I see because it's celebrated number one and it's looked at as food, which it's not really food, but we need food to survive. So touch on that a little bit about the problem that we're having with these big food companies and the marketing that's out there.
Well, the story is super interesting, and it's funny because being in it so long, I think everybody's heard the story, but it's probably not true. So in the 1980s, uh, the the tobacco companies were getting cremated. They're getting like sued by all the states, and then it resulted in a judgment from the all of the states, the attorneys generals of all the states, that to $1 billion, it probably would be $1 trillion settlement had it happened today, but billions of dollars settlement. But it was also a $1 trillion advertising campaign, which took smoking from 43% of the adult population to less than 13 or 14%.
Wow.
Because every morning you wake up to this new, newscast that they're suing the things and it's bad, tobacco's bad for you, right? So it was a good thing for the population that happened. But what happened is the cigarette companies realized that they um, they saw the handwriting on the wall, right? So they started buying up all the food companies, and literally, R.J. Reynolds and all these companies, they bought up General Mills and all of these, all the food producers, and
Hmm.
they immediately went to work um, using their addictive processes. And this is proven now. They have literally in the University of San Francisco, they have the records that they found from old tobacco and sugar companies where they knew it was addictive and they used it against us. They weaponized
Mm.
it. And there's a bunch of books out there, Hooked, Ultra Processed People, where they talk about now like literally weaponizing science against us, where they'll slide somebody into an MRI and watch how their brain lights up with the new product. They'll literally feed, you can see it. There's some um, documentaries out there where they're lying in the MRI and they're feeding stuff into their mouth and watching the brain scan. Like, so they're
Mm.
watching, like, how is this affecting the brains? Now, think of this on a small child, okay? You've seen where, 4-year-old, 5-year-old birthday party, all the kids are hiding behind their mother's leg and they're scared and nervous and whatever, not talking to each other. Then the cake and ice cream comes out. They're just wild, right? They go crazy. They're literally bouncing off the walls. And that little body is getting this huge ingestion of sugar, and they're literally numbing out. They're numbing out their fear. They're numbing out their worry, their concern. So they're just having fun and they're going crazy, right? They're drugged. Okay, you
Mm.
see
Yeah.
it very clearly. And so this evolution has been, um, it's a perfect storm. What happened in the 1980s at that time is that high fructose corn syrup was invented, or not invented, but it was, um, what's the right word?
Like manufactured.
It was manufactured, but it was accepted as gratis in the FDA, where it was okay to put in the sodas and okay to put in the candies and okay to put in everything.
Got
And if
it.
you can watch the obesity numbers just track right since the 1980s till now, it just goes the curve. I don't know which one goes right on the thing, but it goes straight up and to the right on a curve, on a chart, right? They just run parallel. The more high fructose corn syrup in the system, the more obesity rates, right? And so this story is not common knowledge to people that are younger or that, most of my clients are women between, I like to say 45 and 80, but it's closer to 50 and 80 or
Hmm.
55 and 80 or 90. And the young folks don't know these stories and they don't know how we got to this. When I was younger, and I hate when people say that, but it's true. When I was younger, almost nobody was overweight. Like in high school, like I went to a high school with 3,000 kids in it.
Wow.
It's only like two or three overweight. Like nobody was obese. Like one person was obese, right? And he had other issues going on. And so, people think that we landed in this twilight zone where everybody's obese. So, just kind of a warning. I'm not sure I answered your question. I was
Yeah.
remembering, but I wanted to tell that story, but there was another. What was the actual question?
Well, it was just about the fact that marketing is pumping it out to people of all ages and it's accepted in our, society as a
Oh yeah,
norm.
yeah. It's a norm, and it's easy to build a company. And again, nothing against the manufacturers. They had to build shareholder value, whatever. That was their job. But it's not that hard to build to build a company, as the tobacco company realized, on an addictive product. Because back then also, like I got to get the numbers because that's an important number. I got to find that number out like in the 80s and 90s. But now 85% of the food in the grocery store has sugar in it. All the
Mm.
boxes and bags and cans. And people, even though we think of it as like sweet treats, like we think of it as candy and ice cream and cookies and stuff, it's the savory foods, the pastas, the pizzas, the tomato sauces, even the ketchups, everything has the condiments. They all have sugar in it because they realize that salad dressings, they realize that people will come back to it. They don't know why they like it, but they've manufactured, there's a term called the bliss point, right? And the
Hmm.
bliss point is not too sweet, not too sugary, just at that right place with the combination of the savory where it's perfect and you can eat a lot of it, right?
Hmm.
And this is a manufactured term. The guy's name is Moskowitz, Howard Moskowitz. He's still around. I think he's still alive. But he tells this story on how he got involved in this and how he engineered this bliss point, right?
Yeah.
And this is the problem. It's like people don't realize it. They think of it as food. They think of the stuff in the middle of the grocery store with boxes, bags, cans, jars, and takeout as food, when in reality, the only real food in the grocery store is on the outside of the grocery store, or the aisles with the meat and the seafood and the dairy and the fruits and vegetables. So yeah,
Well,
it's sad because, and then this is kind of sad too, is that you've heard of food deserts where a lot of people don't even have access to that. They
right.
only have access to bags and boxes and cans,
Yep.
and they're just not eating real food, to be honest.
Which
They
is,
call it is food-like substances. That's what it
yeah.
is.
Yeah, and that's making the problems worse in those scenarios.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to touch on was how you mentioned sugar is showing up in more than just candies and sweets, right? And I think this is a huge problem because if you're someone who looks at the label and you're reading the ingredients, well, guess what? Sugar is hidden in plain sight a lot of times by the different names and constructions of sugar, like you just said, fructose, right?
Yeah.
Someone might, if you're not knowledgeable, might turn it around and says, "Oh, I don't see any sugar back here," right? Just fructose,
Yeah.
or just the nine other names, which I'm sure you could spit off. But that I can see as a huge problem if you're not, educated on what to look for on these labels. You know?
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, I think there's 56 names for sugar, barley malt and fructose is kind of hidden. It sounds even healthy because it's in fruit, quote unquote.
Right.
But yeah, I don't want to escape the obvious here, not the not so obvious, put it that way, where, what we talked about earlier, that people just don't realize that those products that we discussed and these manufacturers have inadvertently in a lot of ways, because they weren't thinking of it either, to be honest with you, I'm sure. They just wanted to, like I said, maximize shareholder value, make more money.
Yep.
But it's really caused a problem because of this emotional upset that it causes people. They don't realize they're drugging themselves they're making themselves just feel a little bit better. They're just numbing out a little bit. And then it just gets out of hand because
Mm,
they haven't developed a prayer practice or a meditation practice or an exercise program or another way to work through life's. And it doesn't have to be some old like sexual trauma or physical trauma. Just today's life stresses that they don't have a handle on working through in an organized way because they can just sit on the couch. This is 10 million years of evolution that they've
yeah.
had, to chase food and sex. That's why we're still here as a species. This dopamine system, this brain reward chemical system has been developed to keep us alive. And we learn to hack it inadvertently with sugar and flour and caffeine by sitting on the couch, right? We don't need to exercise. We don't need to do anything, but like any drug, it catches up with you and then the downsides happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And this is the message that I like to deliver or try, and it takes about the arc of a podcast for people to, get all the facts and the history and this, that, and that. But the main message is this idea that if we don't, if you don't let this information, uh, you know, light on you, absorb it a little bit, and kind of like a lot of people are willing to admit, I'm an emotional eater. I eat for comfort, but they're not really taking it all the way to the next level. Also, it doesn't get the respect that a drug or an alcohol does, right? Now it does with, recovering food addicts. They are like, thank you, God, that this information came to me. that I was able to like uh, end my diet bullshit BS,
Yeah.
and that and move into another territory where I really now understand what it was doing with me and to me.
Yeah. So, you had mentioned a little bit ago about people who want to make the breakthrough, but if their mind is not in the right place, if they don't have the right framework and support, that's never going to happen, right? And I know you said you have a lot of people who say, "Hey, Mike, I want to lose weight. Where's the workout program?" Talk to us a little bit of how you drew the connection between like how you deal with sobriety and getting over actual drugs to what makes the switch for people with sugar addictions?
Yeah, good question. Mainly because um, sugar addiction is not yet named in what's called the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So you can't get insurance and go to treatment center with this. And so people are like, is it even real? And then
Mm,
it's a compounded problem of people in the eating disorder world who believe that all foods fit. Okay, that if you can't eat flour and sugar when you're recovering from bulimia or binge eating, that you are not well.
mm,
I'm here to tell you is absolutely wrong. Okay, it's just, now there are nuances to it. Okay, and that the world of addiction medicine and substance use disorder, which is what they call addiction now, it's not, it's the destigmatized term, that world is finally understanding that these products can be addicting and that they can biochemically cause cravings for more. About a third of people biochemically cannot ingest sugar.
mm,
I was the chairman of the board of the Food Addiction Institute during the pandemic, and all of those experts have kind of narrowed it down to these kind of base numbers. And those numbers are a third of people biochemically cannot ingest sugar without setting up cravings for more sugar. Okay, they it turns into an addiction for them, and it affects their weight and their health. And then about a third of people are what we call harmful users, and those folks from the food system that we mentioned could possibly get a reset, and maybe have sugar on their birthday or Christmas or whatever. And then there's a third of people who are, we all hate, no, just kidding. They're like normal, like quote unquote. And again, this has nothing to do with weight. You can be a very thin sugar addict. One of my coaches is an ultra marathoner who runs 100 miles a week. And when she came around, she was carrying 15 extra pounds, still running 100 miles a week. You can never run this off, okay?
mm,
So the problem is, and the answer to your question is that these numbers, this information isn't, there's very few doctors that understand it. There's very few even addiction specialists who understand it. Okay. And this convergence of, remember we said earlier that, you take a little alcohol, you take a little, you shoot cocaine, you smoke out cannabis. The sad part about this is that we share the delivery system of the drug with our mouth and our tongue
mhm,
and our stomach, and that the withdrawal symptoms come from these organs, these systems in our body, right? And what happens is that people think that growling stomach is that they're hungry.
mm.
Here to tell you that it's a withdrawal symptom, that my stomach hasn't growled in 30 years, 35 years. It's,
Really?
yeah, the growling stomach is not a symptom or a sign that you're hungry. It goes away completely. It's a sugar and flour withdrawal symptom, okay? Um,
Wow.
yeah, and people are like, there's no way, you know what I mean? And then, I've heard of hangry, where
Yep.
people like they got to eat food, whatever. I think this is often, and this is controversial a little bit, often mistaken for quote unquote hypoglycemia.
Hmm.
But I've seen so many people that are hypoglycemic that the symptoms of hypoglycemia are really severe sugar addiction withdrawals. And if
Mm.
they get through it, even if they've got to titrate a little, they've got to step down a little bit and ease into it. and have a little bit, like, just so their doctor doesn't go crazy, You've seen these people that say, well, I got to eat something sugary because my blood sugar is low or whatever. If they can get through it to the other side with some guidance, then quote unquote, they do not have hypoglycemia anymore. They do
Right.
not have the spikes up and down, right? Because you've heard the keto flu.
Yeah.
The keto flu, if you look at the symptoms, is sugar withdrawals. Okay.
Got it.
It's like the symptoms put side by side are identical. Okay. They're
Hmm.
identical withdrawals. And so the difficulty is A, we've got to get it into a diagnostic, and there are work groups now. For the World Health Group, I'm part of those work groups I publicize all their work. And the DSM, there's another work group in the United States to get these things so that addiction can be married with these drugs. Like the recovery process can be married with these drugs. And so it's a lot of work because of the misunderstanding. But it's very similar to the world that we came from, which is the tobacco industry, where doctors used to advertise on television. They got their stethoscope and their white coat and they're smoking a cigarette saying, whatever. And it's this kind of evolution that we're working through. How long it will take, hopefully with the internet, the tipping point will be sooner. My heart hurts really for the kids because seeing an overweight child, like kids are mean. They don't mean to be, but and I've heard this from all my clients, when people start calling you fat or overweight when you're a kid, it hurts your self-esteem and then it just makes you eat more because you want to not feel that shame or that guilt.
Yeah.
It's really it's a tough, not intractable problem, but it's a difficult problem that requires a lot of podcasts, a lot of summits, a lot of information delivery, and one client at a time to keep, getting the message out.
Absolutely. And I have one more question before we kind of get into that stuff and start talking
Yeah.
about the summit. Um, so the first thing is that I want to give some practical advice, right? Because listening to what you're saying, even though I consider myself a healthy person, I eat a lot of whole foods, I am 100% addicted to sugar. I don't drink soda, I don't drink sugary beverages, but
Right.
I will have ice cream once in a while, and I can see the need to take an extra scoop or pop an extra, cookie when I don't need it. So I'm definitely having these symptoms.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I can only imagine someone with less willpower is way worse. So what are some things that we can do as an individual to start turning this around?
Yeah, no, great question. And I want to make you comfortable that I am on a lot of recovery podcasts because of my openness about it. And about halfway through, most of the about 50% of the hosts say, Mike, the reason I had you on, I've been sober for 10 years and I can't quit sugar or whatever. So it's very common, even savvy people, addiction recovery savvy people, they don't, they're, and you can see that the person's overweight or whatever, and quote unquote, they're sober, but they can't quit the sugar. A lot of
Yep.
my folks are like that, right? So there's no worries there. But the practical is simple, and not simple. It's simple to describe, but harder to do. And here's the one that's really scary. Like it's 100% abstinence. My only job in life, Sean, is to give people a view of 90 days of sugar freedom, flour freedom, and caffeine freedom. If they can get there, and there is a modicum of willpower required at the beginning, okay? Like you've got to get through that first 10 or 15 days,
Hmm.
the saying in drug and alcohol recovery, don't use and let even if your ass is falling off kind of thing. It's like you got to get through that because it's nasty. Look, anybody that's got a habit of these three things at the same time, who tries to do them all at the same time, will be incapacitated days 4, 5, and 6. I try and shoot for a weekend or some time off because They're going to be sleeping all day. They're going to have headaches all day. They're going to be starving all day. They're going to be irritable all day. It's just nasty. It's like, and you got to think nicotine withdrawals, so not heroin withdrawals or alcohol,
Right.
DTs or anything. It's livable. You can get through it, but it's not fun. And so you have to get through it. And the only way to get through it is because people are not gonna, like, your family's not gonna understand, your work group's not gonna understand, your friends aren't gonna understand. You have to have another tribe of people who have either been there and succeeded or doing it with you, right? So that you can like peer recovery is a real thing. It's the only thing that's ever worked in drug and alcohol. But even in cancer, like if you join a cancer survivor group, your chances go through the roof of
Mhm.
long-term survivorship because of the people as opposed to the people that do it alone, right? So it's well scientific, very scientifically peer-reviewed system. And so that's what the Zoom groups, and when I talked about the
Okay.
Zoom, that's where they come in. So you do need some sort of support. Now, look, you need information. Look, you got to eat whole food, okay? I mean, you can Google it. You can I'm kind of moving away from the idea that vegetarians can do this because there's just very little food that they can eat, okay?
Yeah.
And so, and at the begin, my first coach was a vegetarian. She's still successful, but it's like it's harder. And I was vegetarian when I did it, okay? So I know it's possible,
Hmm.
but I also did a lot of damage with a lot of other stuff. I wasn't savvy yet about the flour in the early days and the grains and things that can do damage. So, our stuff is a little bit more keto or carnivore even, but so, but I'm not here to tell you what to eat. I'm here to tell you what not to eat and what the repercussions will be. Like it's not going to be that you're burning calories. It's not going to be this, that, and the other thing. It's really what we've been discussing, which is this emotional shift that you have to go through
Yeah.
and and this emotional reconfiguring that you have to go through. And so, fast forward. So about day 15, this is going to hit you, the emotional part, right?
Mm.
Common refrain is, Mike, I'm losing my mind. And I hear it all the time. They're crying, they're weepy. And the reason is because they haven't yet laid into place these new systems of exercise or getting a hug or calling a friend or getting a massage. I mean, you can Google self-care. There's hundreds of ways to create dopamine. Now they've got cold plunges and saunas and red light therapy. There's a million ways to raise your baseline dopamine to make you feel better. Practices that don't include substances. Write
Hmm.
that down, gang. Practices that don't include substances to self-care, right? And so if you again, there's a little bit of stick-to-itiveness more than willpower to get through those first 15 or 20 days. By day 25, 30, and this is just pattern recognition at this point, over, tens of thousands of detoxes, okay? Tens of thousands of people through our Facebook groups, through our off social media groups, my book downloads. I mean, all of these things you can just see it. Like people go through the same process all the time, right?
Hmm.
So you get to about day 25, 30, and the noise has settled down. The biochemical, if you're, that bottom third of people who biochemically probably shouldn't be using sugar, the noise of the cravings. The two things that I study the most are cravings and denial. Okay.
Mm.
Denial is a symptom of drug addiction, right? Like you obviously can see your buddy who's like ruining his life and upside down. No, I just drink on the weekends.
Yep.
Denial is a real thing, and it's the same in food addiction or sugar addiction. It's the same, okay?
Yeah.
And cravings is like you're craving alcohol, you're craving your pot or whatever, but you're craving the food, like and the body, this is the part that's really still a mystery to me. It's like the body sets up this craving. that you're craving, um, like ice cream or chocolate or whatever it is, a soda, and then you have the growling stomach or whatever. But in reality, what you're it's really just craving for the dopamine hit. You're not craving a
Mm.
sweet taste on your tongue. You're craving a dopamine hit. And when you can separate those two, literally, I actually ask people to sit down, say to themselves, what do I really need, dear? Like you call yourself dear or honey. Like be kind to yourself and say, sit down, deep breath. What do I really need? It's not chocolate. It's not ice cream. It's something like the boss is an ass, the spouse isn't being difficult, whatever. The kids are anything that you just don't want to deal with right now. You just want to numb out just for 20 minutes. But the problem is 20 minutes later, you're going to need to do it again and again and again. That's
Yep.
how things work. And so it's this process that is not a mystery to me anymore, but it's a mystery to a lot of people. And let me tell you why. Is because if you let's just say it's January 1st in the new year, right? And you want to quit sugar, you every diet on the planet says cut back on the white stuff. And so people restrict the white stuff while
Hmm.
they're exercising, eating less and exercising more, right? Okay, so you lose 20 pounds and now it's March or April, okay, or 30 pounds or 40 pounds. You've done well. But the problem is, the statistics, 95% of all people who lose any amount of weight gain it all back in the
Yep.
first year. And then they add some, right? On top of they add more. It's easy to explain from what we've talked about today. It's like, life was good January 1st. Right after Christmas, finances are good, the kids and family, everybody's good. But, March or April comes around and you've lost 20 pounds, you're feeling physically good, emotionally good, mentally good. Something happens, whatever. Somebody dies, or you get a divorce, or, lose a job. And you don't think to yourself, like on Friday when you need a beer, you just want to forget the week, that you're actually going to numb out. You just say to yourself, I'm at my sister's wedding, I've lost 20 pounds. You're not thinking of that job loss. You're not thinking, you say, I just want to have a piece of her birthday cake or her wedding cake. And then if I've heard this story once, Sean, I've heard it 1,000 times. Like they're just off to the races.
Yep.
One, there's a saying in alcohol recovery is one is too many and 1,000 never enough. It's the first one that gets you, not the 10th or the 50th.
Yeah.
So, and all of these things, they sound easy or they sound logical to some people if they've opened their mind a little bit. And I probably should have said this at the beginning, but if they open their mind a little bit and see it not only in themselves, but in their close friends and family,
Hmm.
same patterns, right?
Yep.
And the goal is not to repeat those patterns. It's actually, Tony Robbins calls it a pattern interrupt, where you literally like smack your fingers, your hands in front of your face. So you interrupt the pattern of, I'm going to have a little cake at my sister's wedding.
Yep.
And it snaps you out of it because that's old school thinking. That's dopamine, craving
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, and
So,
I saw one of your posts. This kind of goes along with what we were just talking about here. It's not that you're going sugar free, it's that you're loving yourself enough to not basically poison yourself with the sugar. And I just love that because if for people who are listening right now, you're kind of seeing the parallels between these things and actual drugs. We didn't really go down the rabbit hole of the negative effects they have on the body because a lot of people know that, and we can talk about those in another podcast. But we
yeah,
know how harmful these things are. It's more about the psychological effect it's having on your body, um, the the steps that you need to take. And Mike was talking about full like removal, right? And knowing that he broke down these are the things that are going to happen in the phases of removing them out of your life, which is why you need support via Zoom, via podcasts, via someone else in person. And I can tell you from personal experience, I've done things similar to this. And I'm going to do it again in January, where it does. It physically hurts, it mentally hurts, but I do have someone doing it with me. So that's going to be very beneficial. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to transition on this last part here to the summit because we talked about a lot of the history behind it, kind of what happens to your body, how it correlates. And Mike did give you guys some tips and things that you can do personally to start getting rid of these symptoms, feeling better, getting rid of sugar in your life. The problem that I see is much larger. If you heard earlier, I mean, Mike, you were talking about when you were in high school, there was only a few people that were heavy and obese. There are alarming rates of childhood obesity, cancer, diabetes, and all types of other diseases. And if we don't recognize that as a huge, huge, huge problem, we're in trouble. So I want people to learn more about your summit so that we can start to make a change in society in general. So tell us about the summit that's coming up.
Very well, very good recap of what we talked about. And one of the things that I've learned about in the summit in the last 8, 9 years, whatever, is that the ascension of the understanding of the emotional and mind part of this is out of hand. Like it's called metabolic psychiatry, and it's like, helping. It started helping epileptics, and now, bipolar and all kind of folks are being helped by diet changes, right? Medical, anxiety, people are getting off depression meds. And if you do the correlations of what we've been talking about here today, is that those groups of practitioners, and we've had them all on, the best of the best that are writing books about this, is that this understanding that this originates in the brain is a brain illness and it's an addiction, not a moral failing or a sloth or laziness thing. It's not that. It really is that you've been, through no fault of your own, hijacked by these substances in our food system, right?
Hmm.
And so it's not, nothing to be feel guilty about. But the summits themselves have been just a breakthrough for me. Um, like I always say, if I can get my questions answered, then the summits go fine. And I'm always down some rabbit hole, and I'll have some speaker on. And in the last few years, it's this group of brain scientists and scientists who understand how, like, literally sugar's shrinking your brain. Like it creates holes in your brain, and the volume of your brain is smaller if you're an abuser of sugar. And I want to tell you, leave you, or at least get this in. I always trying to get all the little sound bites in is that when people have lost hundreds of pounds, they put type 2 diabetes in remission. They've done very well. But when we do surveys, they don't talk about that. What they talk about is that the number one thing that they're excited about or they didn't expect above losing 100 pounds, above putting type 2 in remission, is that their brain came back online, that they can focus better, they can remember better, right?
Mm.
Um, it's like their anxiety is lessened. So that's been just really exciting for me. They're getting off depression meds or whatever. People that have been on depression meds for decades, literally decades. So anyway, and I learned that, I learn it from the summit and then I get it to the folks, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So the summit itself is, about 45 or 50 speakers, depending on where we land. It's January every year. This year starts on January 6th, which is a Monday, and it goes for 7 straight days. And those 45 speakers or 50 speakers are broken up every day. So every day you get an email, and there's 6 or 8 new ones every day. And then you can watch them for free. You just got to go to quitsugarsummit. Oh, there'll be a link
Yeah.
a
Well,
special link for Sean. But you just go there, just click that link, and then it will tell you what the new speaker is each day. Okay, and it's just amazing. I mean, there's differing views of, they're not all 100% mine. A few of them are not. abstinence base. A few of them have can, they teach that you can have a little sugar once you clear it out or whatever. There's a lot of different opinions, but there's also a lot of scientists. And one of the things you were talking about before that I wanted to mention, and in the difference between the brain and the body, is that for 100 years we've talked about and people have studied, and we have those guys on too. I call them the body guys, but diabetes, weight gain, heart disease, fatty liver, all these things that we know sugar causes. This is very common knowledge. And but we don't know now, and this is why we've actually have full summits on the brain and emotion stuff that we've talked about. Is the brain and emotion stuff, the addiction stuff, is not as well known as the body stuff, right? We all know that, I mean, like I said, every diet book on the planet says quit the white stuff. So
Right.
we know this, right? And back when I was young, I got to stop saying that. But back then, they used to call the disease sugar. That was the name of diabetes. I
Wow.
got sugar. I can remember distinctly. I don't know what the hell he was talking about. Buddy of mine comes up, and he's, I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "I got sugar." Like, what the hell is sugar? I didn't know what it was. And it was diabetes. That's what the name, that's what they called. That's what the
Wow.
doctor told me he had. And so they kind of moved away from that, but anyway, that's what and they still call it in other countries, they still call it that. But anyway, it's
Yeah.
the summit itself has been a blessing, and it's helped me understand, be able to have a podcast like this. I'm just parroting those guys, kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, MDs, PhD. I have to do the count. I meant to do that the other day. I guess of the 45 speakers, probably 30 of them got doctor in front of their name. You know what I
Okay.
mean? They're people who have, um, and I would say 80, 90% of them have a personal story. Like they've lost the weight, or
Yeah.
their research is based on their own life or their mother or their sibling or something,
Yeah.
so they've kind of gone through. So
That's where
yeah, it's a one.
That's where a lot of people get involved in this space, the health space, because they've had that personal connection either from themselves or a loved one. But just
Yeah.
to real quick paint the picture of the summit. So it's online. Of course, we're going to provide the link for you guys in the show notes below so you can click and sign up for that. It is January 6th, which is a Monday. But so what can they expect, right? Is it like live where you can ask questions? Is it pre-recorded? Like how's the flow of the week going to go?
Yeah, no, good question. So no, it's all pre-recorded. It's all we've recorded. We're pretty much done. We start promoting it here any day now. But it's all pre-recorded events. I mean, you can buy a package. It's like a job. Like it's 8 hours a day of programming. And if you want to time shift a little, you can buy a little package and watch it anytime you want, which a lot of people do. But yeah, no, it's all pre-recorded. It's all, Q&A. We may have some panels, but probably not. But, we'll have some promotions afterwards, but where I have webinars and on more information for whatever, wherever whatever, you got excited about what part of the information was good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to touch on just one last thing is that for anyone who's listening who might have heard some of the stuff we're talking about and you think, oh, that's not for me or that seems too hard. The reason why this summit is going to be so great for you is because it's going to be empowering, right?
Mm.
If I told you that cigarettes cause cancer, you're not going to smoke cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
Well, by joining this summit and learning all of this information, you're going to be empowered to know the information to make that choice, right? To know that, hey, this is why I'm not doing it. It's not some foo-foo diet that you're trying. It's like you're going to be loaded with the knowledge from 45 to 50 professionals who've been doing this for years and years and years with science backing it. So I can't see of a better situation to equip yourself with the knowledge necessary to make the change.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It's absolutely true. I mean, it's kept me in the game, if you will, because it's kind of hard. People are, they're in various stages of readiness, they want to do it, but they just don't see themselves either not having sugar. Even for the 90 days, it's hard.
Yeah.
That's why we do it in January because people have, with the exception of Valentine's Day, you've got about a 90-day run to Easter before you're inundated with more sugar.
Yeah.
And people want to do their resolutions. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be sometimes you have to be fed up where that you've dealt with so many symptoms for so many years and you're in pain. It doesn't take that. It doesn't have to take that. You don't have to be suffering and in that much pain to make the jump because guess what? It's only going to better all of your life in every way, shape, or form. If you jump on the train, right, and take the plunge now. So, any last thoughts or anything you wanted to get out, Mike, before we hop here?
Yeah, no, this has been enjoyable. I just want to, like I said, I mean, I think the most important for me, I think there's going to be, I don't know when the tipping point's going to be, Sean. I don't know when this catches on like cigarettes, the tobacco did. But it's building. You can feel the pressure building. The people that I have on the summit that are, we call them friends of the summit, they keep coming back because their message is so valuable. Um, their clarity of messaging, the size of their following, business, whatever you want to call it, keeps getting bigger. So I know that the industry, if you will, the understanding of what we've talked here today about is growing. My goal is to get it down to childbearing age women, which your audience may be more of, maybe their husbands or even them, because of that. I've always run by the phrase, create your vision and play with who shows up. And
Mm,
who showed up for me has been 45, 50-year-old women and above, and which is fine, but I really, want to get it down so that it just hurts my heart to watch overweight kids struggle and suffer.
yeah.
And really we have an epidemic of 5-year-olds that have fatty liver, which is this is an alcoholic's disease.
Wow.
Anything that we can do to get the message out to younger folks, then that's important. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. And I just want to thank you and commend you for leading the way and pioneering this into society because it's going to help future generations, right? It's not just about us now. This is about our kids, 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 right? And the people who are to come. So I
Yep.
appreciate you, sharing all of your knowledge and your time with us. I will, like I said, guys, I'll be sure to share all of Mike's information in the show notes so you can go find him on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on his websites, and join the summit, right? If you want to get all of this knowledge through a fire hose, right? Join the summit, and you can change your life today, right? When you make that choice. So, again, Mike, thank you so much.
Yeah, Sean, thanks for having me, man. It's been an honor. It's been fun. You have asked good questions.